Hello everyone, Jai Hind and welcome back to another episode of National Security Live, that is National Security Live episode 15. Today we are going to discuss one of the most complex, sensitive and strategically important international borders of India, that is India-Myanmar border. So when we talk about borders of India, most of discussions generally revolve around India-Pakistan or India-China border that we usually think as two fronts of ours, that is India-Pakistan border one front and second front is India-China border. But there is another frontier in east which is equally important from the perspective of national security, that is India-Myanmar border. So this is not simply an international boundary. It's not just something that separates India and Myanmar. It is a frontier where geography, ethnicity, insurgency, organized crime, narcotics trafficking, even border management, trade, infrastructure, about critical minerals and China and Act East policy of India all come together. And that is exactly what we are going to understand today. So this is going to be part 1 of episode 15, because this episode 15 is going to be a bit longer one. I have designed it to be in details, so I want to cover each and every topic, so it will be in 2 parts. So this is part 1. Before I begin, I would like to request everyone kindly to switch into 1.5x for your better experience. Let's go ahead. So where is the India-Myanmar border actually? Let's begin with the geography. India actually shares a land boundary with Myanmar. The exact figure of in kilometers, it will be around 1643 kilometers, that is 1643 kilometers of borders with Myanmar. This border passes through 4 Indian states. One is beginning with Arunachal Pradesh, sorry. Then is Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram. That is, you can remember it as ANMM. ANMM. That is Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram. ANMM. So from north to south, the India-Myanmar border frontier, it actually extends across a significant portion of India's northeast. You see, all these states, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram, they are all northeast Indian states, and the border with the Indian border with Myanmar, it lies in the northeast Indian states. On the other side of the border, there are Myanmar's or Burmese region, including or they are called province. They are called Kachin province, Saigon province and Sin among other province. So these are the states. On one side, in Indian side, we have Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram, and on the side of Myanmar, they have Kachin state, Saigon state, Sin among other states. So immediately we can understand why this border is so different from many other international borders, from the extreme geography, from the rainy terrain, from the wet terrain, from the jungles, etc. This is actually not a flat desert frontier like we have frontier with Pakistan along the through the Thar desert in around Gujarat and Rajasthan. That is actually desert, but this is not a flat desert frontier. This is even not a heavily urbanized boundary. Much of this frontier actually it passes through mountainous terrain. It passes through dense forest, very dense forest. You can't even imagine of that. There are various difficult river systems. You know, like in Brahmaputra, in you have heard of Brahmaputra river in Assam. It flows through the Assam. In Myanmar also there is similar name of river, that's Irrawaddy river. The Irrawaddy river, it flows through Myanmar, and Irrawaddy makes a river system in Myanmar. So this border goes through a difficult mountainous terrain, very difficult mountainous terrain, dense forest, so dense that you can't even imagine of it. Difficult river system, various tributaries of Irrawaddy river systems, and areas receiving heavy rainfall. This area of border, this border receives heavy rainfall. It's very wet in most of the years. There are hills, valleys, thick vegetation even, and an extremely difficult terrain for movement. And this geography has enormous implication for national security. Imagine you are trying to monitor a border where there are like thousands of kilometers of hills and forest and limited roads, even heavy rainfall, and numerous natural routes through which people can move, maybe say, let's say, hilly routes. And how can you just prevent people from passing through such routes? How can even you imagine to fence such borders on various hilltops? It's very difficult, right? The geography itself becomes a geography challenge here. Geographical challenge equates into or translates into a security challenge here. And this is an important point that we should remember throughout our lecture, throughout this episode of episode 15. On the Indian-Myanmar border, geography is it's not merely a simple geography. Geography is national security factor. The terrain along Indian-Myanmar border is one of the most difficult terrain in which a security forces can operate. Actually, Assam Rifles is operating at present since 2001, since we have one border, one force policy, and from that Assam border, Assam Rifles is taking over in the security of Indo-Myanmar border, and you can imagine how difficult it is to operate in such terrain, in such difficult terrain. There are heavily forested areas, steep hills, valleys, and remote settlements even. Sorry. You can just think during monsoon in present situation, it actually becomes so difficult. Roads can become so muddy, movements become slower, visibility can be reduced to very minimum, just few meters. Rivers and streams can become obstacles here, and most importantly, communications and logistics can become extremely challenging problem in such terrain for security forces. Therefore, the problem is not simply identifying an infiltration route, not identifying the immigration or illegal immigration route or insurgents routes. The problem is physically reaching, monitoring, and just looking after or dominating the terrain. How security forces would go there in such terrain, how they are operating, it's itself is a big challenge. This is actually one reason why India-Myanmar border it has been historically been so difficult to seal completely. This border is so difficult to seal because of such a difficult terrain. And this actually brings us to another important characteristics of this frontier. The border cuts across communities that have been actually historically shared ethnic, linguistic, and cultural connections and cultural concentrations. Same cultural people lives on the both sides of the border, and just when the borderline passes, the borderline itself cannot divide culturally communicated culturally or the communities who share similar cultural values. How can a border can just differentiate them, just can differentiate them? It's a big deal, right? So ethnicity and artificiality of this modern border is very difficult. We have to look it from the point of view of ethnic distribution and the artificial or political boundary or political modern boundary. So one of the most fascinating aspect of this border frontier is that the international boundary it doesn't correspond to the traditional social geography of the region, or it doesn't go with the demography or ethnic distribution. Many communities living in northeast India actually have ethnic and cultural connections with communities living across border inside Myanmar. So we can talk about communities like Naga communities, like Kuki-Zo communities, even Mizo communities you have heard of, and even Shin communities, right? They are all distributed across border on the both side of borders. So these communities existed and interacted long before the modern historical or the modern international boundary, the political boundary was established. Like now, the present form, before it is actually established, these Naga, Kukizo, Mizo or Shin communities, they have been there for centuries actually. So families may live on different side of borders even. People may share similar language, they may share similar traditions, they may have cultural and historical relationship even. And therefore, for actually many people living along the border frontier, the international boundary, the political boundary, it can be a just relatively recent political division imposed by the states of India and Myanmar. But the older social landscape, it remains the same, or it tries to remain the same. The social fabric tries to remain the same. And that's the important thing. This creates a very complicated problem for border management, because the Indian government, it has to secure an international border from the point of view of national integrity and security and national sovereignty. The Indian government, we have to secure our international border. At the same time, it has to take into account the legitimate social, cultural, and economic relationship with various ethnic communities residing on along the border. And here we reach one of the central dilemmas of border management. How do you actually secure a border without, let's say, without unnecessarily disrupting the communities that have historically lived on both sides of it? How can you actually secure it? How can you give security to this border without disrupting the cultural values of communities, without disrupting the brotherhood among the communities who live on the both sides of the border? So let's look into it from the historical perspective of modern border security, right? Sorry. To understand the present situations, we also need to understand the history of the region, right? Without history, without geography, we would not be understand anything. And let me tell you, one of the greatest lieutenant generals of India, he taught me that if you want to solve a problem, particularly security problem, or maybe if you want to solve a conflict, if you are not taking into account history and geography, it is not possible to solve this conflict. You have to go deep into the history, you have to go deep into the geography. If you take into account these two parameters, history and geography, then only you will be able to just think of solving the conflict, or just think of creating a secure border. So in India Myanmar frontier, it has actually evolved through colonial history on both sides. The emergence of modern nation states and political development actually that followed Indian independence and Myanmar's independence in 1947 and 48 respectively. After independence, India's northeast actually experienced a number of insurgency movements, from the Naga insurgency, Kuki emergency, even Mizo emergency. These are like in huge scale. The Naga insurgency, at a time it became one of India's longest running insurgencies, right? Someday we will discuss about it in details actually. On the other hand, Mizo insurgency, it also emerged later, even though it is not now, it is almost solved. But it was once a very big problem. Similarly, in Tripura also there were problems, in Meghalaya also, in Assam also, in Arunachal still there are certain problems. So in Manipur, they witnessed the rise of several insurgents organizations. Probably Manipur has the largest number of insurgents organizations on out of the northeast India. Assam also experienced major insurgent movements like Ulfa movements, NDFB movements, etc. And the geography of India-Myanmar border, it became an important part of this security environment. Why it is so? Because insurgent groups operating in India's northeast, they could potentially exploit the difficult terrain across the international boundary. They can simply, in simple language, they can just go to and fro to Myanmar and India through such boundaries, so through such difficult terrain. So if we look into Myanmar and India border through the Northeast Indian insurgency, we would learn a lot more things. This is actually one of the most important sections of today's discussions. Historically, various insurgent groups from India's northeast have actually operated in areas close to this Indo-Myanmar border, from NSCN IM to Kokizo to Ulfa, NDABs, and most of the organization, they just operated, and they have their camp around or training camp or shelters on around the forest and hilly areas of Myanmar border. Sometimes Indian side, sometimes on the Myanmar side. This region is relatively, the reason of it was actually relatively straightforward. The terrain, it's extremely difficult to dominate for security forces, and the international boundary, as we have discussed, it's too long, 1643, right? And parts of Myanmar's borders, they have historically experienced limited government control and armed conflict. In India, yes, we have full government control, but in Myanmar, states like Kachin, some one group is dominated. Sin province is one group dominated, and other province may be dominated by other group. The government is not homogeneously distributed. The governance is not same in each of the states. Okay, therefore some insurgent groups actually, they have been able to establish camps, training facilities, and as we know, the logistical networks, or maybe temporary shelters in areas across the border, the both side of the border. But we have to be academically careful here. We should distinguish between official Myanmarese or official Burmese government policy and local armed group activity who actually control such regions. And the security vacuum created by the conflict and limited state control inside Myanmar. It would be incorrect to simply say that the Myanmar government officially supported every Indian insurgent group operating out of Myanmar soil. No, it is not so. It is not correct. The reality was, it has been historically much more complicated. Someday we will discuss in details about what's going on in Myanmar in terms of India's neighbor security, then we will understand it better. Actually, in different periods, there have been different relationship. There have been different relationship between Myanmar's authorities, ethnic armed organization, local communities, and Indian insurgent groups. And the difficult terrain it is sometimes been more important than formal state policy itself. Whatever state policy has been, the difficult terrain and also the ethnicity, distribution of ethnicity, it has been a more important factor than the formal state policy. Sorry. If we focus on Naga, Mizo, Manipuri, and Assam insurgency, the India-Myanmar border therefore been connected. We can see that they are actually connected to such insurgency, directly or indirectly, with several major insurgency problems on around Northeast India, from let's say 1960s to present time. The Naga insurgency, it was perhaps the longest historical connection with borders regions, particularly with Myanmar. Then we have Mizo insurgency, which historically affected Mizoram and surrounding areas, even though it is almost solved now, but at certain period it was very much erupting. it was very much violent. Manipur, it is still experiencing multiple insurgent organizational activity or multiple insurgency activity and prolonged armed conflict. The Assam, in Assam also witnessed insurgent movements from Alpha to India B, including organizations whose activities were cross-border in nature. Before they were Ulfa and NDAB were operating in Bhutan, but in operation from 2021 to 2010, after that they moved completely to the Burmese territory or to the Burmese border. So the important point is not that every insurgent group operated in Northeast exactly come from there or exactly having their safe houses or safe bases on that border. No, but most of the organizations operating or most of the insurgents groups operating in Northeast India, they have had certain logistical, certain safe house connections or certain arms trafficking connections, even training connections from the Indo-Myanmar border. Their objectives, the organizations, ethnic bases and operational strategies of different organizations was different, but the common factor of these organizations were the geography. Every organization, like let's say Ulfa had different objectives than NSCN, than Kuki insurgents, but they may have different ethnic base and different operational strategies, different demands and goals, but the terrain was same, the geography was same. The geography of their operation was common factor. The Indo-Myanmar frontier could provide an environment in which such armed groups could move, could reorganize, could re-establish and camp there, also maintain various logistical networks. This is why border management and counterinsurgency in Northeast India, it couldn't be separated from development inside Myanmar. We have to look into what's happening inside Myanmar or inside the border states of Myanmar if we want to go deep into the counterinsurgency operations of or counterinsurgency strategies of Northeast India. If we go to the role of Assam Rifles when we are discussing about counterinsurgency, Assam Rifles it has a long history in India's northeast and plays a major role guarding the Indo-Myanmar border. It is therefore extremely important in India's border security architecture on this frontier. Assam Rifles also works on other frontiers, but headquarters in Lightcourt, Shillong, its main responsibility is to protect India-Myanmar border. Its responsibilities and activities include border domination. They have to dominate the border in terms of security, surveillance, counterinsurgency ops or CICT ops, and coordination with other security and intelligence agencies of India as well as Myanmar. This is very difficult. Often they have flag meetings with Myanmaris or Burmese forces. And operating in such region is not so easy, my God. and Assam Rifles patrol may have to operate through mountains, through forests, rivers, and remote settlements. The force, therefore, it has to combine both conventional border guarding with counterinsurgency capabilities, including jungle warfare and mountain warfare also. So this is an important distinction than other forces. The Indo-Myanmar border is not simply a border where you can just put a fence and deploy guards. So Assam Rifles doesn't like operate in this way. Like in Indo-Myanmar border, there is nice fencing like some of our other borders, and they are just guarding through the fence. No, it's not going. And sometimes they had to go inside the territory of our neighbor states knowingly or unknowingly just for security. Sorry. So this is a security environment, right? And Assam Rifles actually operates within that environment. So if we now move ahead a bit with various cross-border operations along the Indo-Myanmar border, India has actually demonstrated that it is prepared to take action against insurgent threat operating close or across the Indo-Myanmar frontier. One of the most and widely discussed example was like 2015 army operations, Indian army operation along Indo-Myanmar border. Following, there was an ambush on Indian security forces in that year in 2015, and after that Indian army actually operated along that Indo-Myanmar border. The operation, it becomes significant because actually it demonstrated India's willingness to pursue interest threat beyond immediate Indian side of frontier. It demonstrated that India can go beyond its border to protect its sovereignty, or just to deal with its insurgency problem. Another important operation was like Operation Sunrise. You can Google or YouTube Operation Sunrise. You will find a lot more videos, a lot more information in there. Maybe in someday we'll discuss about Operation Sunrise. It involved coordinated military action by both India and Myanmar. Operation Sunrise happened in coordination with India and Myanmar against various insurgent groups along the shared border. It was one kind of surgical strike of India, even though it's not so much theaterized, or it's so much famous like Uri attack or maybe surgical strike attack. There was not such movies like Uris and etc. But Operation Sunrise was a huge success and a template for India, that India can go beyond its border to protect its territory and for counterinsurgency operation. So these operations actually, they are important from a strategic perspective, because they demonstrate that border security actually, they actually, such operation demonstrate that border security doesn't necessarily stop at the physical boundary. India has demonstrated with such operations like Operation Sunrise that border security, for border security, we are not just limited into our side of border. If we needed, we will just cross the border and we can eliminate whoever is threatening our sovereignty or disturbing our country. So in counterinsurgency or CICT ops, in intelligence, mobility, and even in diplomacy and military capability, these all are interacting in such operations. But these operations also demonstrate something else. It demonstrates that cross-border military action requires political coordination. That's a very big deal. Political coordination and political will is very important in such operations. Intelligence preparation is very much important, and diplomatic management is also very much important. You see, we had Operation Sunrise and there was not so much hue and cry. We had our success through Operation Sunrise, and maybe we don't know how many such operations had been there for maybe decades, but our forces have been doing such operations. But one or two operations across our western front through Pakistan, it got global attention. But we had such operations on around this Indo-Myanmar frontier, and there was no attention from the world media, right? Maybe it was a kind of diplomatic management also. Who knows? So what? I think we will discuss about border crossing points in our next lecture probably. What do you think about that? If you want, I can even go with the border crossing point if you want. Okay, let's finish this border crossing points in this lecture, and from next lecture we'll from the part B we'll go with the another theme. So let's come to some various border crossing points in between Indo-Myanmar border. There are like most prominent one probably you have heard of, the More-Tamo border, Moreh-Tamo, More-Tamo border. More is in actually Manipur and is one of India's most important gateway to Myanmar. There's also a famous market in More. You can even buy some of the Burmese stuff there, even some stuffs for Thailand and other countries. It's a kind of it is a border market. So this crossing is particularly important because of its connection with India's broader connectivity and India's ambitions towards Southeast Asia, the Act East policy that India have been doing. It's the Moreh border crossing is very much of important. Another one is Zokhautar Rikhaudar border. I have not gone there. I went to Moreh border, but not to this Zokhautar Rikhaudar border. It is through Mizoram and Myanmar. It is also another connecting point. There are also traditional and strategic crossing in other frontiers like in Arunachal Pradesh also. These border locations, they are actually important not only from security perspective, they are also important from the perspective of local trade, from the perspective of transportation, maybe livelihood of the local ethnic communities, and even that of migration, connectivity, and various regional economic integration programs. And this takes us actually to a very important transformation in the way we think about India-Myanmar border. It is not merely just a security frontier, as we are discussing even from an angle of national security, but I must stress on that India-Myanmar border is not just about a security frontier. It is also a trade, a regional economic integration frontier. It is about local livelihood, transportation, connectivity. It's about a lot more things. It is becoming an economic frontier, and we should make our efforts to make it an economic frontier than a security dilemma. So we will discuss about trade and connectivity in our part B of this lecture, since we have done our 30 minutes and my cute avatar is moving here and there. So anyway, thank you for being live with so much number of people, and if you have any questions, please do write me in the comment box. You can also WhatsApp me your request or your questions or whatever videos I should make about national security, and I will be making such type of videos as you request, and I will be happy to answer your questions. And please do watch these videos on 1.5x. I don't edit videos much, so this is National Security Live episode 15 part 1, and at Gyanonymous School we do with raw, unfiltered and live videos. Thank you for watching. Jai Hind, Bande Mataram.